Go. Okay, and a very warm welcome to everyone. Thank you so much for joining us at the latest and a very exciting instalment of our ongoing Winspiration series, celebrating the women at the heart of the library sector in Scotland and how our profession really has a unique part to play in empowering women across our communities, including in health and well-being, which we're going to be exploring in detail today as we learn how the Alliance's Women's Health Conversation Café toolkit can support us to combat medical misogyny, to champion evidence, to create space for women to articulate their health and well-being priorities in their own words. So for anyone who doesn't know me, my name is Kirsten. I'm Membership Officer for Philip Scotland. We're also joined today by our graduate trainee, Leah. So if you need anything throughout, please don't hesitate to send us a message in the chat. You're aware that we are recording the first half of today's presentation. It's in speaker mode, so you won't be very visible. You're entirely welcome to have your cameras on or off, entirely your preference. If you could keep mics muted for now, just so that we can hear our speaker, that'd be fantastic. But of course, in the spirit of feminist collaboration, we will be eager to hear your voices as the hour goes on. And with that, it's an absolute delight to welcome to the Winspiration stage Jen Stewart, the Senior Development Officer at the Alliance for the Scottish Government's Women's Health Plan. So Jen is going to be sharing with us how their Conversation Café model and toolkit can help debunk myths, dispel stigma, and empower women with information and support positive peer discussion on what matters most in women's health. And if there's time today, we'll also be delving into a mini Conversation Café of our own. So fascinating stuff. Thank you so much for joining us, Jen. Whenever you're ready, the virtual floor is yours.
Thank you very much. I think it was a lovely introduction. So I'm just going to share my screen and hopefully everybody can see these slides. Yeah, perfect. Cool, brilliant. So yeah, thank you so much for having me along today. So as Kirsten said, I'm Jen Stewart. I am Senior Development Officer for Women's Health at the Health and Social Care Alliance. And as Kirsten said, we have been working really quite closely on many topics of women's health, and we have produced this Conversation Café toolkit for women's health as part of a programme of work that we're delivering in support of the Scottish Government's Women's Health Plan. You know, as the resource, it's very much about, you know, ensuring accessible and engaging kind of information sharing on health, and really for communities to have conversations kind of locally. So I'm really pleased to be able to share it with you today, because you know, I think we all probably agree that libraries are really great hubs for that kind of work. So yes, I'm going to speak a little bit about the toolkit, the kind of background, the why, you know, why did we choose conversation cafes as a model for kind of these conversations? And I'll also kind of go through what's in the toolkit, but there will be space for kind of discussion as well, and I'm happy to take any questions as well. So there we go. So if you're not aware, just a bit of background on the Alliance. So the Alliance is Scotland's third sector intermediary organisation for health and social care. So we are a membership organisation. We have about, I think it's about 3,200 odd members, and that is organisations, so third sector organisations working in health and social care, but importantly it's also individuals, so professionals, but largely people with lived experience. So it's unpaid carers, it's disabled people, it's people living with a long-term condition. And our remit really is that kind of lived experience engagement. So it's ensuring that people with lived experience kind of input into policy and service design around health and social care, and that they have access to kind of relevant information. So as I mentioned, so our Conversation Café toolkit has been produced as part of our kind of broader programme of work supporting the Women's Health Plan. So just to kind of give a wee bit of information, if you're not aware, so the Women's Health Plan was published by Scottish Government in 2021, and it sets out 66 action points that aim to reduce gendered health inequalities in Scotland. And those are across a number of kind of priority areas for this kind of first iteration of the plan. So in this current plan, we're focusing on menopause, menstrual health, endometriosis, abortion and contraception, postnatal contraception, and also cardiac, women's heart health. So the plan is, it's kind of policy document. So it is kind of focused on policy and service developments. But there's also a lot in there around ensuring better access to information, that women feel like they they are empowered with information, that healthcare professionals feel informed around women's health, and that services and treatments are, I suppose, responsive to individual needs, and that they're kind of innovative with respect to women's health. But I suppose broadly, the plan really sits within that kind of real need for, I suppose, culture change. Kirsten, you mentioned medical misogyny. So it's really kind of tackling that kind of culture change around how women and women's health is kind of understood, how it's reacted to, how people are listened to, things like that. So there's a lot in it, but pleased to say that there's actually a lot of progress that's been made as well. So our programme, as I say, sits within the kind of priorities of the plan, but our focus rather on policy and service kind of design is, as I say, around that lived experience engagement. So we've been running our programme since the start of last year, working really closely with Scottish Government on it. And it kind of focuses on a number of areas, and I've put some things up on that slide, but I think in kind of general, it's around 3 areas. So one is that kind of direct lived experience input to the plans and how the plan is kind of implemented. So for example, we hold a stakeholder group that meets quarterly. So that's kind of women and people with lived experience coming together, having a dialogue with Scottish Government, understanding the progress of the plan, and kind of inputting their own experiences and priorities into that. We also do a lot of signposting and information sharing. So we host webinars, we run community sessions, and we produce resources so that people have access to kind of robust information that's positive and affirmative, and that really tries to kind of counteract misinformation or kind of stigma. And then the kind of third point, which is very much kind of, I suppose, linked to that bit around information sharing, is around kind of tackling that culture change that I spoke about. So really ensuring kind of positive spaces for these kind of conversations, and how women's health is really understood and framed. And that's really where the kind of toolkit kind of comes in. Throughout all our work as well, we work really, really closely with partners, so with kind of community groups, with third sector groups. So that's why, another reason why I'm really pleased to be speaking with you all today. And that slide here just gives us an example of some of the things that we do, but I can share a link as well round later to kind of our resource hub, so you'll be able to kind of explore some of these videos or webinar recordings or kind of resources that we've produced in your own time, and please feel free to use them, in your kind of libraries or wherever. So, so obviously I'm here to speak specifically about the toolkit. So the toolkit, it's a kind of newish resource. We produced it and we published it in July. So we're still very much in that kind of promotional phase and really wanting as many people as possible to take it up. It has been really well received so far. So yeah, so hopefully I can give you a kind of good account of what's in it. So just before I kind of go into that, just to give you some information if you're not aware. So I've put up in this wee box here, what actually a conversation cafe is. So what are we talking about? So a conversation cafe, I'll just read from this box, is an informal space where a small group of people can come together in a facilitated but open conversation on a particular topic. There's emphasis placed on creating an environment where relationships are formed, where everyone feels comfortable to speak, and where listening is also a valuable act. So, that's really the kind of background there. So we produced this toolkit really to support groups to host their own conversation cafes, and really to discuss kind of women's health experiences within the context of that, what is a conversation cafe? So the toolkit it's a guide for delivery. It's really there to be used quite flexibly, to help people, set up, host, and evaluate their own independent cafe. So, it's quite a good sized document. There's lots in there, but it includes some kind of theory on engagement, but largely it's around it's that practical use. So there's resources there, there's session plans, there's kind of prompt questions and facilitator support, and I'll kind of go into that in a wee bit more detail. So I wanted just briefly as well, just to speak about, I suppose, why we chose conversation cafes as a model for this work. You know, why did we think that was an appropriate route to that kind of culture change, or kind of having that kind of space for information sharing that was important to us. And this image is taken from the Women's Health Plan, and it just kind of pinpoints some kind of gendered inequalities, or I suppose kind of disproportionate experiences when it comes to kind of women and their health. And as I say, this all kind of really informs our work, and it's really why we created the toolkit. So you'll see there just some of the examples of that kind of inequity and kind of women's experiences. So, you know, we do a lot of engagement with women, and as I say, we have that stakeholder group, and throughout it, women kind of share with us really, really frequently that they oftentimes don't feel listened to when they engage with health professionals. They feel a sense of shame sometimes, or stigma attached to health experiences, and that could be, you know, with menopause, or with periods, or with kind of pelvic health, things like that. But importantly as well, that they feel that their own experiences often sit in isolation, really, because we're not socialized to kind of talk about it. We're not often sharing these concerns or experiences with other people. I don't know, that's not the case for everybody, but obviously I'm kind of generalizing slightly here, but it is the experience of quite a lot of people that we've spoken to. So for us, this kind of model of the cafes, it's a way to bring people together to really kind of have that safe space and have that supportive environment, so that these kind of issues can be discussed, so that, you know, those myths and that shame can kind of be dispelled, and that women really have an opportunity to feel listened to, and that they feel valued when they share their experience. And I think sometimes just somebody saying, I experience, I don't know, for example, during the menopause, I have this menopausal symptom, and somebody saying, oh, I have that too, that alone can just, it can be so empowering for people. So the aim of the toolkit, so on the right hand side of the slide there, you'll see a little kind of bubble with different things in it. So we hosted a workshop at the start of January this year, just with kind of third sector practitioners and kind of community organisers, just to explore, I suppose, what would be important to include in the toolkit. So what is in the toolkit is really informed by, I suppose, lots of different voices. And a number of these kind of people had used the Conversation Café model before. So they kind of shared, you know, why it's important, or what it kind of means to them. And you'll see in that bubble, there's just some examples of that. So, you know, it's information sharing, it's support, it's relationships, it's, you know, raising awareness, but importantly, it's kind of people. So I suppose the main function really of the toolkit is really to act as that kind of informed peer support kind of space, really, for those with lived experience. So it's really encouraging people to come together to learn from each other. As I said, it's about tackling that stigma, and it's building a kind of sense of, I suppose, trusted community for many people to share their experience. We really think it's important that these conversations are, you know, backed by information as well, so that people are also maybe getting signposting from it also, so that they can kind of take that next step. They're not just sharing their experience, they maybe know where to go next, or they have a little bit more understanding of maybe the kind of broader picture of maybe, you know, if they're talking about menopause or whatever. So, you know, that's why there is a lot of resources in the toolkit, so that kind of participants and facilitators can make use of that. But really the aim of the toolkit is for it to be used independently of us at the Alliance. So it's really to be taken up by organisations and by groups and you know, by pals, whatever. It's really for them to kind of support them to host their independent cafes. And we really want to kind of empower groups to be having these conversations themselves, and really to be kind of leading on what they want from them. So yeah, so please, you know, get the word out. It's here to be used. And I think as well, you know, we've been, as I say, doing a number of webinars and things like that, which have been very, very successful. but we are aware that it's important to have kind of non-digital options as well, and kind of community orientated options for people to come together and to learn. So I think Kirsten has put the toolkit in the chat. So you can kind of go away and you can have a little bit of a better look around what's in it. I'm not going to kind of sift through it right now, but there is lots in there. We also have print copies. So if anybody would like a kind of hardback copy, then they can email me. We can happily send out as many as you would like. But I thought I'd just kind of go through a few examples of what's inside. So as I say, the toolkit's pretty practical. So it really kind of outlines the kind of steps and the thinking that might be required to host a cafe. So on the left of the slide here, you'll see a bit of a planning summary. So this is in the toolkit, but the toolkit also then kind of dives further into these areas that are outlined in the summary. But I suppose this summary just really helps you to kind of, like at a glance, just kind of think about hosting your cafe. So you'll see there's things around recruitment. So are you starting a new group from scratch to use the toolkit, or are you going to use the toolkit with an existing group or with friends or whatever? It's just thinking about that. There's things around venue. So obviously the toolkit, we do want people to mostly use it in person, but that might not be the best for everybody. So there is obviously an online format to consider too, but it's just thinking around things around the accessibility of the venue. Is the venue the most comfortable space to be discussing these particularly private things? So just some of the kind of thinking around that. An important thing, and I can speak a little bit more about this in a bit, is around that kind of purpose and boundaries. So it's really understanding what's the why of your cafe. So why are you gathering these people together to discuss, like what's going to be that kind of shared expectation that everybody has, and within that, what are the boundaries that we need to set so that everybody feels quite comfortable and safe in sharing their own experiences or just kind of listening to other people. So we encourage people to set out a group agreement and things like that. There's also help there for facilitators. Conversation cafes are typically participant led, so they are kind of an open and flexible model, but oftentimes just having a facilitator just to kind of keep a steer on it is really helpful. So it could be that they just start it off and then it goes from there. But as I say, because this is a health focused conversation cafe, in some respects, the facilitator can really support tackling maybe some of misinformation or just kind of being mindful maybe of the kind of boundaries that have been set. So there's resources there for the facilitator. There's resources around the actual conversations itself, so how to have these kind of informed conversations. And then there is some kind of support around that kind of post-session work, so maybe some evaluation work, or maybe that kind of further signposting that I spoke about. On the right, there's some examples of kind of starter or prompt questions. So obviously, because we're doing this with the Women's Health Plan, we've kept it quite specific in terms of the priority areas that are currently in the plan. But, these are just examples. These are maybe for groups that are just starting out and that maybe just want a bit of support to get the conversation going, or maybe for the facilitator to maybe steer the conversation, or maybe just move on from maybe a discussion that's been ongoing. So they're here to be used, but the discussion does not have to be, confined to this. Also, if participants feel like they take the conversation and away from some of these priority areas, that's up to them. That's absolutely fine. But we put these in here, as I say, just to give a little bit of support. As I said as well, now the cafe model is very informal, and it's purposely shouldn't really have an agenda, if you like, but we also do recognise that sometimes setting up a new group, or just knowing that you're going to be talking about things that are maybe a bit personal, can be maybe a bit daunting for maybe people that haven't did it before. So we thought we would give some kind of examples of what a kind of conversation cafe session might look like, just so that people feel a little bit supported and maybe taking that first step. So you'll see there we've got different examples, but I thought I would pick on one of them, which is example 2, and that's maybe beginning by sharing a resource on women's health. So watching a little video or looking at some graphics, and then having a conversation based on what we've seen. So we have a resource hub linked within the Conversation Café toolkit. So that would take anybody that scans the QR code, so whether that be a facilitator or participants, to resources. So there's videos there on women's health, on some kind of specific areas or more general areas. There's links to graphics, as I've said. There's links to lots of different resources that can act as that prompt. So that's the kind of behind some of that thinking I was talking about having informed conversation as well. So hopefully those resources can kind of spark reflection in participants, or it can maybe inform them around things around women's health. So it's bringing in that signposting even while we're having these conversations. The toolkit also includes some things to, I suppose, be mindful of when hosting the cafe. And so it's really specifically about, how did we make sure that this toolkit supports these kind of independent conversations and supports groups to have that safe space and to really establish those boundaries, like I spoke about, and also tackle the misinformation. So, as I say, there's that resource hub there that can be used. We also have a lot of information for facilitators that I spoke about. But we recognise importantly that there are, intersections of experience. So we've put some kind of key considerations in that toolkit that might just help people to ensure that their cafe is intersectional, and that just considers that, people's background and identities might be informing their health experience. So there's things there around social determinants, gender sensitive and kind of trauma informed facilitation, cultural awareness, and also accessibility. Obviously this isn't, it's just kind of, I suppose, given a kind of taster of some of that. But there is more resources linked in that people can explore these areas further should they want to. So, as I said, so far the toolkit has been well received and it's been picked up by a few different groups, but we really just want to kind of keep getting the word out and really encouraging people to use it. So I suppose I'm really here today with that kind of offer, if you like. So, please explore the toolkit and consider, would it be useful within your own kind of library practice? Would people within your own library network find it useful to have these kind of conversations and supportive discussions? Or would just even promoting it in the library or encouraging groups maybe to use your space to kind of host their own cafe, would that be an option? So yeah, but as I say, the toolkit's there, and I can very much send print copies to people that want a little bit more of a flick through. But we would like to really showcase the different groups that use the toolkit. So we're looking to produce some kind of case studies, which would include on our website and on our social media, and also within some of our kind of final reporting on our programme as a whole. We obviously would support people to kind of pull that together. There is resources in the toolkit around evaluating the cafe as well. And we're also going to host some kind of probably quarterly facilitator support sessions. So these will just be drop-in. So it'll be people that are already using the toolkit or people that might want to, and it's just for them to kind of come together for us to kind of learn from each other, to talk about what worked well or maybe what's been a challenge and things like that. So that is also an offer to support people to use the toolkit. We also have images that can be used as well within promo and branding, and we'd be happy to share them with people. So yeah, that's me in terms of the toolkit. I know there's probably a lot there, and the toolkit itself, as I say, has lots in it. But I'll leave it at that. We also have a women's health mailing list as well, which kind of details all the stuff we do, all the different events and things like that. And that's a monthly e-bulletin that goes out. So if anybody would like to sign up to that, then please do. You can just email this address, whp@alliance-scotland.org.uk, and we can subscribe you to that, and you can stay up to date. But I'm going to stop my slides now, and I'm happy to take any questions if anybody has any thoughts or wants to know a little bit more.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Jen. That was such a a fantastic overview of what is such a comprehensive piece of work. And I think it's sobering, it's saddening in some ways that it's necessary when we look at the landscape that women's health has historically faced, and why this deficit of information is out there. But I think there's such thought has gone into why it's necessary, the impact that it has, and actually the support for facilitators as well. That's really touching. It's kind of a real ecosystem of support and solidarity, which is wonderful to see, and very much chimes with the mission of libraries as well. So I'm sure we'll have some conversation cafes set up very, very shortly. Does anybody have a question for Jen at the moment? I know I've got a few of my own, but just while you're thinking of them, feel free to, we're small groups, you're welcome to raise your hand, or you can just add anything into the chat. We'll take a few moments, and as I say, we will be pausing the recording shortly, but just for now, if anybody does have a question, and we'll definitely all be signing up to that mailing list as well. Just while people are thinking of their questions, Jen, I was wondering, I think the resource hub, it's a fantastic resource, quite literally, and I don't think even I had appreciated the depth and breadth of what's out there. And I wonder, when it comes to women struggling with access to information, I know it's early days for the Conversation Café feedback to be reaching you, but as sort of information literacy champions here in libraries, what is your take on what is the main barrier? Is it women don't know where to go for the information? Is it the accuracy of the information that they receive, or is it more the response they get? Because of course a lot of these issues have historically been surrounded in shame and stigma. What kind of barriers should we be looking to tackle, do you think?
I think there's a lot in that. Like, I think, in terms of where to get information, that can be a real barrier. So women have shared to us that often they feel that there's just a lot of disparate information, and they don't really know what's the kind of the true source, or what's the kind of one place that they can go to. So the Scottish Government, as part of the plan, actually produced or created a women's health hub on NHS Inform, which kind of brings together all of that information. So we're really trying to make sure that people are aware that that's like a kind of a good source there, because it can be really overwhelming, I think, just to kind of sift through. I think social media can be great because it gives people, I suppose, it makes people often feel that they are not alone in their experience, and they get a kind of window into maybe other people's. But I think it's being mindful, it's finding a balance, I think, between that and kind of the misinformation there. So I think that's maybe a challenge. But I think in general, there's challenges around just inequality, just like social inequality. It's back to that kind of intersections again. It's like how particular groups of people are, just have little kind of resources to access these services, that they're not supported to access these services, that they don't know about these services because they're not told, whether that be through bias, whether that be through just kind of structural kind of inequalities within our kind of society. I know it's a big topic here, but I think that is just a big barrier. And that shame and stigma is a massive barrier, because I think there's been a lot of focus on women's health recently. I think menopause particularly, which is really, really great, because it means that people feel like there is a dialogue and a kind of discourse around it. To some degree, there's maybe a wee bit of sensationalism as well, which can sometimes be quite a kind of barrier for people to kind of step forward or to understand their own experience. So I think it's ensuring that women feel like they don't have to kind of hold that shame, or so that they can ask the questions, because it can sometimes feel that they're disempowered to even ask the question because of that kind of wider kind of cultural response to women's health, I think.
Thank you. That's so helpful. And that point about intersectionality is crucial as well. We've recently, we kind of called it our menstrual literacy mini series. We've covered period poverty, menopause awareness, and you're right, it can still, the landscape is such that you feel any progress we have to appreciate, and yet it can still, be centered towards those of us who are more privileged and fail to recognise the entirety of women's experiences across Scotland and across the world. So it's so valuable to bear that in mind. And I know that you mentioned the conversation cafes having a trauma-informed approach as well, and that sounds like something we could hopefully explore in the second half of the session, just practically what that looks like, because I know that's a spirit that we're all wanting to bring into our library spaces more broadly. Kimberly's asked a great question in the chat. Is there a centralised place online to find out if there's already a conversation cafe near you, or do the partners just advertise individually? Because that would be great for either sparking up library partnerships or knowing for a fact, oh, there isn't one in our library area, we can set one up.
That's a really interesting thing, and it's not something that we have in place. So the Alliance has what's the word for it? It's like a directory, right? So it's called Alice, which is a local information system for Scotland. So that pulls together, it's kind of community led. So it's people that put on it are the people that upload to it are the people that are running certain initiatives. So that is a directory for kind of local services and mostly community services in Scotland. And that's across lots of different health areas. And what I'm hoping to do with the team is actually put a bit of a search function that's just around women's health, so that people can find kind of local services in their area. And I think with the conversation cafes, it might be nice if we do kind of make sure that there is that kind of information on there, and really encourage people to kind of fill that directory with these kind of sessions. So like you say, there isn't duplication, but even then, I think, you know, it's because conversation cafes are for kind of smaller groups. Now you can have a kind of conversation cafe and have multiple tables at a session, but because it's like there is a value in maybe just 6 people getting together and having a conversation, I think that even if there is duplication in an area, it's not necessarily a bad thing. But I think, yeah, that's a really good point, just so that people know where they can access that cafe. So yeah, that's given me some kind of good food for thought. Thanks, Kimberly.
Oh, good. And I think that is the beauty of anything like this happening in person as well, that kind of alchemy of just the people that are there on the day, what they happen to share, it will never be replicated exactly in the best possible way. We've been exploring this ourselves at CILIP, in that we just had Green Libraries Week at the start of this month, and we had a map where we were pinpoint, because again, there's so much going on across the sector. Nobody, certainly my brain can't hold it all. I don't think any of us can. So it is really helpful to just see even visually what's happening and where our hotspots are. And yeah, so that would, okay, well, we'll make sure that some libraries are populating that directory.
I mean, that's one of the reasons that we decided when we were making this to work really closely with different partners, because there's so much good work going on, and there's so many great resources out there on women's health. And you know, there's ones that are specifically focused on particular conditions like endometriosis. Endometriosis UK have lots going on in Scotland. There's, you know, different mental health charities that we looked at that do great work with conversation cafes, like the Scottish Recovery Network. So it's it was really making sure we pulled all that expertise together, so that we could kind of so that people knew that there was lots out there, but we weren't kind of duplicating it.
Definitely. Now, before we move on to our kind of own conversation cafe segment, so if anybody does have any last minute questions for Jen at this point, please do pop them in the chat, raise your hand. I actually just wanted to briefly pick up on something that we were discussing before the event began. So just to kind of explain for everyone, we were talking about, because the toolkit is a relatively new resource, and how we evaluate a piece of work that by definition it's exploring really personal, potentially intimate themes. And yet to gain further backing, further support, further funding in many cases, and this is an issue that libraries face, we need to be able to demonstrate the difference that we're making. How are you kind of encouraging facilitators and conversation cafe hosts to approach that paradox?
Yeah, no, that's a really good point, because I think the conversation cafes, they're not about collecting personal information. Like that's not the aim of them at all. It's really there as a resource for the people that attend rather than for the organization. So I think, but I completely understand that as well, because we do obviously have evaluation built in, but so for us, it's more about understanding what people have learned and gained from the cafes, and where that's maybe taken them in terms of their own health experience and their own kind of health journey, if you like. So that's one of the reasons why we're quite keen as well to do these case studies, so that, you know, we can promote how the toolkit is being, is working for ensuring these kind of local community conversations and signposting on women's health, but also that the organisation as well, or the community group that's running them, can evidence the impact that it's having on these individuals. So I think, and we were chatting about this, is that it's around, and we've had some of this feedback from, for example, just our webinars. So it's like being in these spaces and having these conversations, or just hearing from somebody else about their own experience. Sometimes that's enough for somebody to feel empowered enough to go to their GP. And we've had that feedback from people. Actually, we ran a community session a few months ago, and somebody said, oh, actually, I now realise that I need to go to my GP because of my heavy bleeding, my heavy periods, and I'm actually going to go book an appointment. So, it's these kind of things. It's just it's knowing that information actually went somewhere, and that people are, I suppose, that people's health is actually benefiting from it. Is one nice kind of way to see that kind of evaluation. That's, I suppose, for me, where I'd like to see the impact.
Sure, that makes sense. And we will make sure lots of library case studies are winging their way to you in the coming weeks and months, definitely. Oh, thank you so much, Jen. It's been utterly fascinating. And I think, that point about, that listening is a valuable act, and also that we want to hear, the diversity of voices of women across Scotland. It's so key, and it's at the heart of Winspiration as well. And I think that probably takes us quite nicely to maybe experimenting with a bit of a mini conversation cafe of our own, perhaps. Again, we were talking earlier about the fact that libraries have such a key role to play in supporting women in our communities, but we're also a women-led profession. There are about 75% women across the sector. So we have a dual role, a dual perspective here that's so valuable to explore. So as we delve into our Conversation Cafe section, I will pause our recording. So if anyone's watching on the catch up, we'll be back with you shortly. And yeah, Jen, thank you so much. It's so necessary, it's so vital. And I think there is a real inextricable link here with libraries and how we support health and well-being across our staff body, across the sector, and for women across Scotland. So yeah, thank you. We are really excited to see where it goes. I think some conversation cafes will be springing up across Scotland's libraries before too long. Yeah, and we've got our kind of connections formed in the chat. We've got lots of resources to share, including them in the follow-up email as well, to make sure that, yeah, these cafes, these conversations can take root. And lots of thanks coming in the chat for you as well.
Thank you, everyone. Yeah, and my email is in the chat. Please feel free to drop me an email. And also, Kirsten, you're welcome to share my email to the kind of wider mailing list as well. If they'd like to get in touch, they're welcome to.
Terrific, we will do. Oh, we can't thank you enough, Jen. It's been incredible, and yes, we hope to welcome you back for another Winspiration before too long.
Lovely, thank you so much. All right, everybody, stay safe in this weather.
Yes, definitely. Wrap up warm, everyone. Take care, and we'll see you at another online learning soon. Thanks all.
Bye, everyone. Bye.